You're watching Mick and T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. And now, here's two guys who always celebrate the start of March Madness by taking jump shots into the Bay of Fundy, Evan and Joe.
I'm Joe Ticotsky down in New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm Evan McFarlane here in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, Canada.
And you're watching episode 51 of Mick and T's Sports Report. As Mark mentioned in the opening, each year we both get ready for the upcoming March Madness by working on our jump shots into the Bay of Fundy. But being the taller of our pair, you end up rebounding all the missed shots.
I do not, actually. I'm going new school NBA style, where the big guys stand outside the three-point line and just chuck up bricks. That's why we throw it into the bay. It's the only splash I'm going to make.
I like that. Quick New Brunswick headline. Next month, the province will be getting a new area code as the longtime 506 will get some company as it's joined by 428. You guys are amazing. First, you got push button phones. Then you got the cell phones, and now you got a second area code. What's up with that?
Oh, man, but moving on up, yeah, it's irrelevant to me. I run by technology. If I lose my phone, I know nobody's phone number anymore. It doesn't matter what your area code is.
Good point. It's high time we started plugging some local businesses. So before we go to break, we'll start out the first time. We'll highlight good old Honeybeans Coffee, Tea, and Treats, located at 180 Water Street in St. Andrews.
I've got some on the go right now, actually.
There you go. Nice. Well, after this short break, we go sailing, but not like in that sappy Christopher Cross song. You're watching Mick and T Sports Report. We'll be back. Welcome back to Mick and T's Sports Report here on CHCO-TV. In our quest to give you a variety of sports here on the show, we take to the water in the sport of sailing as we welcome Canada's top female racer, who is a 22-year-old who's ranked second in the world. She'll be leading Canada's entry in the first ever Women's America's Cup set to take place in 2024 in Barcelona, Spain. But today, coming to us from Pensacola, Florida, where she's training, let's say hello to Isabella Bertold.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Evan.
Hi, thanks for getting on with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's get rolling here. You grew up in the lower mainland of British Columbia. How old were you when you started sailing, and what other sports did you participate in growing up?
Yeah, so I first sailed a boat when I was 5. I was one of those kids that had a whole bunch of sports on the go all the time, various summer camps, and got signed up for the summer sailing camp off Jericho Beach in Vancouver. When I was 5 years old, it was an all-day camp and provided lunch, so it checked a lot of boxes for my mom at the time. And so I got signed off and off I went, and sort of instantly fell in love with it after actually refusing to go on the first day. I was not very excited about that. I was used to, I don't know, I'm going to say faster paced sports, but I think some of my favorite ones were swim team. I was a big fan of cross country skiing in the winters. I absolutely loved playing field hockey in school. So sailing was definitely a different sport for me to try.
Nice. Evan?
Yeah, I guess that, like most of our viewers, I'm pretty new to the sailing stuff. My knowledge is fairly thin too, but a bit of research that we've looked into about why after 137 years did the America's Cup decide to finally add a Women's Cup?
Yeah, I think there's so many reasons for it as to why. I think we've seen a big shift in sport in general. I mean, last year was the first ever Women's Tour de France that was held, and I think we're seeing a lot more media attention for women's sports. So all of that really does lend itself, and the technology of the boats has really changed as well, particularly over the last 10 years. I think if you go back and look at photos of America's Cup sailing from sort of 30 years ago, there's really quite large, strong, what I'm going to call more like football linebacker sized men sailing the boats. And that's just because of the loads and the physical demands. And technology has really driven the sport into these fast boats that literally fly over the water. There's AI-based systems in the background that help sail the boat. There's hydraulic pumps and there's battery power and all of that. And that's made it much more accessible for a variety of sized people to actually go and race. And so now I'd say really women can race head to head on equal playing field against men.
Okay. Now I looked in your bio in 2019, you actually retired from Olympic sailing and took up road cycling at the professional level. First, what made you retire from sailing, and then what brought you back into it?
Yeah, I'd say probably the last sort of five years of my Olympic sailing career were a lot less focused on the result side and just really focused on loving the process and loving the sport again. I had some pretty big injuries in 2012, 13, and 14 that I'm going to say took a lot of the joy out of my sailing. And I actually went back and started working with my youth coach again, who made me promise and said, you can't stop until you love this again. And so we're going to keep going until you love it, until you're happy. And so that took all the way to 2019. But I knew when I was sailing in on that very last day of Olympic sailing that I ended up doing, I was in Genoa, Italy, and everything just felt right to step away from the sport. I had raced really well. I was happy with where things were at, and I knew I wanted to go sailing again at some point in my life, which was a big bonus. I did start road cycling through that, actually, sort of a couple years before I fully stopped sailing. I picked it up a little bit by chance. I was just doing injury rehab, and biking was really good for it, and went and did a race, and being a competitive person, got completely hooked on the speed side, but also really the team work side of the sport of cycling. When you're sailing in a boat by yourself all the time, it's not something you get a lot of. And I think it brought a whole another element of joy to the competitive side of my personality and hooked me. And it's really fast and really fun and quite thrilling. And so yeah, still road bike racing as well, actually, right now alongside sailing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I know a lot of kids these days tend to specialize in sports, and then by the time you get to college, there's the burnout factor. So it's interesting how that sort of happened to you sailing, but you found something else on your competitive side that filled the void.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I give younger athletes now is, if you like doing a sport, just do it. Find a way to do it all. Don't worry about specializing on one thing. And even like a sport like sailing, there's so many different types of sailing. There's the dinghy side on the Olympic side, foiling, there's ocean racing. I sort of just encourage people to try it all. I think one of my biggest regrets was specializing at such a young age and being so laser focused on just one thing.
Sure. Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you look at pro sports, and one of the most taxing but coolest things about professional sports is that you get to travel so much and see all these different places. But I can't think of a sport where you'd be able to appreciate your surroundings in these different areas more than just sailing on open waters on it. Maybe tell us some of like the favorite spots that you've gone to. And I live in a place that has a lot of boats around it. I was just wondering if you've ever been around Atlantic Canada at all.
Yeah, actually, I've done quite a bit of racing out in Atlantic Canada. Most of it's been in St. Margaret's Bay. Sailed in sort of closer to downtown Halifax as well. PEI, I did I believe it was the Canada Summer Games, done a Youth Nationals in New Brunswick. It's a phenomenal place to sail. It really is. I think it's one of the best places to sail in all of Canada. Really fun conditions and a really good community around it as well. And yeah, definitely, I have traveled a lot and gotten to race on a lot of different bodies of water. Before I started foiling, I used to say anywhere that's warm, windy, and wavy is going to be my favorite spot to sail, but foiling boats don't really like waves that much. So I think that opinion's starting to change. But it seems every time I go and sail or race in Spain, Portugal, it doesn't really matter where, the sailing really is just, it's phenomenal in terms of conditions. And there's definitely a growing list of places, though, that I'd like to go back to and do some more sailing or spend some more time. And that's everywhere from Osoyoos, Brazil was a really special place for me. I just loved sailing there. That was amazing conditions. Like, I think if anybody likes water sports, they need to go and check it out down there. It's pretty incredible.
And yeah, lastly, before we let you get back out on the water, what's a typical training day like for you?
Yeah, you know, it's been an adjustment for me coming back to sailing, because we are a weather dependent sport. So you can have your day perfectly scheduled, but if there's no wind at 1 p.m. when you want to go train at 1 p.m., that's not going to work very well. So there is a lot of flexibility day to day around just looking at weather forecasts and when the best window in the day is going to be to go out and train. But I do still race bikes as well. So I always have, I'm going to say, at least 2 to 3 hours a day on a bike that I'm balancing alongside sailing. And then I'm actually also doing a master's degree right now. So my time is not on the water on a bike. I've probably got my laptop open, working away on various school things.
And I looked up, you use the same boats as the men. They're, it said 40-foot carbon composite monohulls.
That is correct. Yeah, so the men's teams are all also racing these AC40s and using them as sort of test boats for the bigger 75-foot that you'll see the men racing in Barcelona in October. But they are, I'm going to say, it's probably the most technologically advanced boat that you're going to ever see on the water that right now. They're absolutely crazy. Speeds of 80, 90 kilometers an hour are pretty standard. And they fly over the water. So you've sort of taken everything to do with the physics of sailing and combined it with the physics of flight, and you're processing all of that and still trying to make the best tactical decisions around a race course.
Man, so that you're talking like a little over 50 miles an hour for us Americans.
Oh yeah. It's the speeds are really quite something. It's one of the things that I think brought me back to the sport, was a little bit more of the adventure, thrill seeking side that I was missing on the slower Olympic sailing side. Nice.
I think my biggest problem would be the sunburn. I would last about a minute on there. But it's amazing. And we're gonna, throughout the interview, hopefully we'll be able to pop up some pictures of some of the boats and things like that. Absolutely fascinating stuff. She's Isabella Bertold, skipper of Canada's entry in the first ever Women's America's Cup, coming to Barcelona in 2024. Isabella, thanks so much for enlightening us on the sport and for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm working on building this Olympics that Joe and I are going to do against each other. So I think sailing is going to be the next sport. So we might have to reach out for some tips, because I'm actually going to reach out and not tell them that I'm reaching out, because I do need a bit of a head start on some of these.
I won't let Joe know.
Perfect.
CHCO Olympics.
Yes.
Well, coming up next on Small Town Spotlight, get out your ID and charcuterie board. Yes, as we head to British Columbia to visit a winery. You're watching Mick and T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Welcome back to Mick and T Sports Report here on CHCO. It's time for our 41st installment of Small Town Spotlight and our 4th visit to the province of British Columbia. We've previously visited the towns of Ladysmith, Duncan, and Coombs, where you may remember the goats on the roof. And now it's on to Osoyoos, population 55-56. The town is located just 2 miles north of the U.S. border with Washington State. And believe it or not, their average daily high temperatures in July and August are about 31 Celsius, or 88 degrees Fahrenheit, making it one of the hottest areas in all of Canada. Osoyoos is also the birthplace of former NHL player Chuck Kobasu, who played 13 seasons in the league. And it's also home to Nk'Mip Cellars, the first Indigenous-owned winery in all of North America. So let's head to British Columbia to talk wine by welcoming in Troy Ravndahl, Nk'Mip Estate Manager. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe. It's a pleasure to meet you.
All right, let's get right to it. First off, when people think of deserts, Canada doesn't typically come to mind. So tell us a bit about the desert where your winery is located.
Well, it was quite interesting because for many years, people have called this the northernmost tip of the Sonoran Desert. And that's actually a little misleading. The Sonoran Desert's in the southwest US, Arizona, California, and Mexico. But we have some similar flora to them, and that's where it has gotten at. It's actually its own little mini pocket desert, part of the Columbia Plateau ecosystem that stretches about 60 miles north of Osoyoos to about 70 to 80 miles south of us here. And it has its own distinct climate and flora, fauna. We have antelope shrub that the antelope sage that is part of that Sonoran Desert ecosystem, and that's part of the reason it has sort of been tied to that. So you see the Sonoran Desert, or Sonoran name, tied to a lot of different businesses in the area, but it really is its own unique Okanagan desert. Very dry and arid. We get less than 12 inches of precipitation a year here. So it leaves us a very hot and dry climate through the summer growing season for our grapes. So
nice. Now, the Osoyoos Indian Band has sold grapes to wineries around Lower British Columbia for decades. When did the Nk'Mip Cellars open, and what made you decide to start your own winery?
Great question. So, as you mentioned, the band have been growing grapes for a long time. Over 50 years, they've been growing grapes and have been selling them to various businesses and other wineries through the area. But one of their business partners came to them and actually asked if they could plant some more vineyards on the Osoyoos Indian Band reservation. And at that time, the band was looking at that as an opportunity to add to their business portfolio and wanted to go into a joint venture of creating their own winery so that they could produce their own grapes and produce their own world-class wines to be representative of their culture and their history here in the valley.
Okay. Now, if I visited Nk'Mip Cellars, what else would I see on the grounds?
Nk'Mip Cellars is just one of several businesses that are on the Nk'Mip Resort here. Right next door to us, we have a venue called the Hyatt Spirit Ridge, which is a part of the outbound collection of the Hyatt company. And it's really a home away from home. They aren't hotel rooms, they're suites with private kitchens and seating areas and private bedrooms for all. So you can come and enjoy a lengthy stay here and feel like you haven't left anything behind from your home. There's also a 9-hole golf course just behind the winery, which is the Sonora Dunes Golf Course, as well as the Desert Cultural Center, where you can learn more about the Nk'Mip people and their history and their ongoing story in this region. Of course, we have a patio restaurant outside of outside of the winery here as well, which gives you great views of the vineyards down below and down to Lake Osoyoos and across to the town of Osoyoos. So there's lots to see and do right on site here. It really is one place to stay and enjoy several different activities while you're here. So
excellent. I'll have to tell my co-host, he's a golf pro at the Algonquin, or claims he is. So I'll have to tell him about your course if he ever gets out there. In regards to the wine, how many outside restaurants do you sell the wine to?
Well, like several businesses during the pandemic, that took a bit of a hit, but we're actually up to almost 100 restaurants throughout BC that carry our wines. We're in an enviable position where the demand for our wines actually outstrips our production. So we could probably be in more places, but because of our limited supply, we have to partner with key partners to ensure that they get what they need to continue to represent our brand in their restaurants.
Sure. Now, are you allowed to ship it anywhere outside of BC?
Well, unfortunately, our interprovincial trade laws are somewhat restrictive. There are a few provinces that have actually updated their restrictions, so we can actually ship within BC, of course, but Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia are 3 provinces that have changed their liquor regulations that allow us to ship directly to consumers in those provinces.
So you could sell as far east as Nova Scotia?
Far east is Nova Scotia, so your friend in St. Andrews can have something shipped to a buddy if he has in Nova Scotia and pick it up from there. So
we're trying to wean him off the wine a little, but we'll that would be great. Now, what other businesses does the band own besides the winery?
The band's actually quite diverse in their holdings. So aside from the winery, they also have a construction company, commercial leasing company. They have their own school, their own healthcare system, as well as they manage their own utilities here on the reserve as well. So they actually have 13 different businesses that they are directly involved with, as well as partnerships and other joint ventures similar to the Nk'Mip Cellars here. So.
Oh, okay. And lastly, because I know people will be asking, I'm not much of a wine person myself, but I know people will ask me, what are some differences between your wines and say wines in California or even wines in other parts of Canada?
Yeah, well, quite different, again, partly because of the climate that we're in. So we are the southernmost part of Canada, aside from the Niagara Peninsula down there. But we also are hotter than anything that's coming out of the Ontario growing region. We sort of have the best of both worlds because we are in a cooler climate. In the wine world, we're actually considered a cool climate growing region. That's because we get cold enough in the winter to make a wonderful dessert wine called ice wine from frozen grapes. But in the peak of summer, it's not unusual for our daytime temperatures to be in the mid 30s during the peak of growing season in July and August. That works out to about 80 to 85 degrees. We can peak up into the mid 90s and hundreds if we get a heat wave that seems to be more and more common these days. But that difference gives us a much riper growing for our big full-bodied reds because of that, and being further north than California as well, we get a longer day as well. We have the nice, warm, hot summers where we can get full-bodied reds really ripe. And being a little bit further north than California for a growing reason, we actually get more daylight. So we actually have an extended growing season in that regard, as far as we get more heat units during the sunny part of the day. But at the same time, we also have cooler falls. We have what's called a big diurnal shift. So we'll get into the lower to mid 20s through the fall during the ripening process and drop down into the mid teens or a little bit lower in the evening. So our ripening process slows down. So it allows the sugars to not get as high, which creates a higher alcohol wine. Some people might like that, but most people like to have alcohol content about 13.5, 14.5% on their big full-bodied reds. And that slowing down of that ripening process through the fall lets our winemakers choose the grapes when they're at their peak instead of having to get it off because it's fully ripe. And in California, it might only get down to 18 or 19 degrees overnight and mid 20s during the day, but that ripening process will continue because it doesn't shut down in the fall, and gives us that little bit of an advantage of really picking the grapes at their optimal time for flavors and sugars and all that balance that we're looking for.
Well, that is some interesting stuff. I will spread the word to some of my friends in Nova Scotia and actually Seattle out your way, and see if they can try some out or visit. Well, he's Troy Ravndahl from Nk'Mip Cellars in Osoyoos, British Columbia. And you can go to the winery's website, Facebook page, or their Twitter account to find out more. And Troy, really, thanks so much for enlightening us and then telling us all about the winery.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the time, Joe. And we look forward to seeing your friends come and visit us here in Osoyoos.
Everybody, welcome back. Joe, why don't you give us a little bit of insight as to what that t-shirt was all about that you were wearing?
Well, it said 99MF4, and that's right. T-shirt I got at the 1999 Men's Final Four in Florida, where UConn won their first national championship over Duke.
So you have a T-shirt from 24 years ago?
Oh yeah. I won't say I've got underwear from 24 years ago, but oh yeah, if it's a good T-shirt, you just keep washing and washing and washing. So all right, let's get rolling. You got a shout out for us.
Yeah, quick one. person that I actually had a chance to work with for a few years on the Golf New Brunswick board, Judy Astle. She was just given the honors from Golf Canada for Volunteer of the Year. So congrats to Judy. She's kind of done volunteering for Golf Canada, Golf New Brunswick for the last 5 decades. Very well overdue for her recognition, but congrats to her and all the best.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that is it for episode 51 of Mick and T Sports Report. I'm Joe in New Haven.
I'm Evan here in St. Andrews.
Thanks to Patrick Watt and Florence Mitchell for producing and editing a show that has aged about as well as Keith Richards. Yeah. So until next time, this is Mick and T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews.